The city was loud, full of noise, full of lights, but for her, it felt empty. She walked slowly through the market street, her thin hands pressing against her stomach that made a hollow sound every time it growled. The alien girl's feet were bare, cut from sharp stones, and her clothes were torn so badly that cold wind passed through them without resistance. She tried to hide her face behind strands of her dirty hair, but every step she took reminded her of her weakness. The smell of roasted meat, baked bread, and hot stew floated in the air, but none of it belonged to her. Every stall was alive with activity, but when she reached closer, sellers turned their eyes away as if she did not exist. She stopped near a food cart where a fat alien was serving fried roots. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked, and she whispered, "Please, just one piece." The seller glanced at her, frowned, and then waved his hand. "Go away. I do not give food to beggars." Her chest tightened. She took another step closer, her voice shaking. "I can work. I can clean." But before she could finish, the seller pushed her back, and she fell hard on the stones. The crowd laughed. Some children pointed at her, mocking the way she trembled. Tears burned her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. Showing weakness only made the world crueler. She stood again, limping, and walked deeper into the market. The voices around her grew sharper. "Look at her, still alive? Why doesn't someone throw her out? Her kind is nothing but trouble." Every word hit her harder than the hunger in her belly. She tried to be invisible, but her shaking steps drew attention. She remembered the time when she had a home, when her mother used to share warm bread with her, when her father told her stories before sleep. All of it was gone, burned away by war and betrayal. Now she had nothing, only her empty stomach and the fire in her chest that refused to let her give up. At the edge of the street, she smelled something different. Not just food, but something rich, full, like roasted spices and thick broth. Her head lifted slowly, and her tired eyes found a small restaurant between taller buildings. The walls were wooden, the windows glowing with warm yellow light. Through the glass, she could see people sitting inside, laughing, eating, living a life she thought had been stolen from her forever. Her legs moved on their own, pulling her toward the door. Her heart beat fast. Maybe she could ask again. Maybe this time someone would listen. When she reached the entrance, she froze. Her reflection in the glass door made her stomach twist. She looked like a shadow, thin bones, messy hair, skin covered in dust. Would anyone inside take her seriously? Or would they laugh and push her away like the others? She almost turned back, but then the smell of bread reached her nose again. She pressed her hand against her belly and whispered to herself, "Just once. Just try once more." Inside the restaurant, behind the counter, a human chef was moving fast. His hands cut vegetables with sharp rhythm, his arms strong, his eyes calm but alert. He wore a white coat already stained with sauces, and his presence filled the room. Unlike others, he did not look cruel or careless. He looked focused, like food was not just work for him, but something sacred. From the balcony above the counter, his eyes shifted, catching sight of the thin figure standing outside the glass door. He paused for just a second, knife still in his hand, watching her. The alien girl did not notice him at first. She kept staring at the plates on the tables, steaming with rice, meat, and soup. Her lips trembled, her throat ached. Finally, her legs gave up, and she sank down at the doorway, hugging her knees to her chest. People passing by ignored her, stepping around her like she was a broken object on the ground. But from inside, the human chef kept looking, his brows tightening. Something in her eyes caught him. It was not just hunger. It was the look of someone who had been denied too long, someone who stood at the thin line between life and death. A waitress came near him and asked softly, "Should I chase her away?" He shook his head. His voice was low, steady, but carried a strange weight. "No, bring her in." The waitress hesitated. "She looks like a street rat. Customers will complain." But the chef's eyes narrowed, and he said again, firmer this time, "Bring her in." The girl heard the door creak. She lifted her head slowly, expecting another insult, expecting another hand to push her away. But instead, a warm voice reached her. "Come inside." She blinked, not sure if it was real. The waitress stood with folded arms, not too welcoming, but she had opened the door. Behind her, the human chef stood still, waiting. Her heart pounded. She wanted to run, because kindness was often a mask for cruelty. But she also wanted to step forward because the smell of food inside was like a rope pulling her closer. She hesitated, her legs shaking. The chef spoke again, this time directly, his voice deep and steady. "You look like you need something warm. Come, sit." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. She slowly pushed herself up, her knees weak, her hands trembling, and stepped inside the warm light of the restaurant. Customers turned their heads, whispering. Some frowned, some laughed, but she ignored them. All she could see was the counter, the chef standing tall, and the faint steam rising from a pot of soup. Her stomach growled louder than ever. She pressed her hand against it, embarrassed, but the chef's eyes softened. He reached for a ladle, filled a bowl, and placed it on the counter. The smell of broth reached her, thick with herbs and flavors she had never tasted. The heat warmed her face. She stepped closer, her eyes wide, her chest tight. She wanted to believe it was real, that someone was actually giving her food. But one question echoed in her mind, a sharp warning she could not silence. Why? Why would a human help her when her own kind had left her to die? The bowl of soup in front of her steamed gently, filling the air with a smell so strong it made her whole body tremble. Her hands shook as she reached out, but then she pulled back quickly. Nothing in her life had ever come free. Every time she had been offered something before, it ended with pain, with someone taking more than they gave. She lowered her eyes, afraid to touch it. The human chef noticed her hesitation. He slid the bowl closer, his rough voice calm but firm. "Eat." His tone carried no anger, no trap, only a strange kind of certainty, as if he had already decided she deserved it. Her stomach growled again, louder this time, and she could no longer fight. She picked up the spoon, dipped it in the broth, and brought it to her lips. The first taste almost broke her. Warmth spread through her mouth, sliding down her throat like fire, chasing away the cold that had lived inside her bones for weeks. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked fast, not wanting anyone to see. She ate faster, spoon after spoon, as if the food might vanish if she waited too long. The waitress nearby wrinkled her nose, whispering to a customer, "Look at her," like an animal. The words stabbed, but she kept eating. Every bite gave her strength, every mouthful a reminder that she was still alive. For a brief moment, she forgot the cruel streets, the mocking voices, the pain in her chest. Only the food and its warmth mattered. But then her mind started to twist. Why was he doing this? Humans in her world were often ignored, sometimes looked down on, yet this one was feeding her without asking anything back. Was this kindness real, or just another kind of trap? Her eyes lifted slowly to study him. He was busy at the stove, tossing vegetables into a pan, the fire leaping up in bursts of orange light. He did not even glance at her as if feeding her was nothing special. That made her more nervous. She was used to cruelty, not indifference wrapped in quiet kindness. After finishing the last drop of soup, she placed the bowl back carefully, her hands trembling. "Why?" she whispered. He turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes catching hers. For a moment she felt naked under that gaze, like he could see every scar, every moment of her suffering. But his voice was simple, without hidden meaning. "Because you were hungry." She did not know how to answer. Her lips parted, then closed again. No one had ever given her such a plain reason. No one had ever thought her hunger alone was enough reason to help. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe it, but her fear told her it could not be so simple. Around the room, other customers watched. Some frowned, some laughed quietly. One alien leaned toward another and muttered, "Humans are too soft. She'll steal from him tomorrow." The girl's ears twitched, catching every cruel whisper. She wanted to run, to escape before their words became truth. But her legs felt heavy, her body too full for once to move quickly. The waitress came closer, leaning on the counter, her voice sharp. "You cannot just sit here all day. Eat and leave. We don't run a shelter." The girl lowered her head, ready to obey, when the chef spoke firmly without even turning from his stove. "She stays." The waitress stiffened, her mouth opening as if to argue. But the look he gave her was enough. She said no more. The girl's heart pounded. Stay? What did he mean? Was she supposed to stay for another meal? Or, her mind raced with fear, was she supposed to pay him back in some other way? She pulled her arms around herself, eyes wide, waiting for the demand that always came after kindness. The chef finally set his pan down, wiped his hands on his apron, and walked toward her. Each step made her flinch, but he stopped just a few feet away, his shadow falling over her. "You said you can work?" His question was sudden, his voice calm but strong. She blinked, confused. Her mouth opened slowly. Yes, I can clean, I can scrub floors, I can." Her words tumbled out in a rush, afraid he would lose interest before she finished. But he raised a hand, stopping her. "Then you will work here. You will eat here. You will not sleep on the streets again." Her breath caught. She thought she had misheard him. A job? Shelter? These were words that belonged to another life, a life she had lost long ago. She stared at him, trying to find the trick, the hidden cruelty. But his face remained steady, his eyes honest. Still, she could not believe it. "Why?" she whispered again, weaker this time. His answer came like before, simple, almost harsh in its truth. "Because you deserve a chance." The room fell silent. Even the customers who had been whispering stopped to stare. An alien man at a table scoffed loudly. "A chance? For her kind? She's nothing but trash." The chef's head snapped toward him, his eyes cold as steel. "Then leave," he said flatly. The man grumbled, but under that gaze, he lowered his eyes and said no more. The girl's chest swelled with confusion, fear, and a flicker of something she dared not name. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever said she deserved anything. She should have felt safe, but instead, she felt more exposed than ever. A heavy silence wrapped around her heart. What if this was just the beginning of a new trap? What if accepting his offer chained her to another kind of prison? Her eyes darted toward the door. She could run now, vanish back into the streets, live with hunger but live free. Yet when she looked at the chef again, something inside her resisted. His voice, his steady hands, the way he faced the crowd without fear, it was different. And that difference made her hesitate. Her silence stretched, her mind torn between escape and trust. The chef did not pressure her. He simply turned back to his stove, as if her choice did not change his decision. That calmness was more frightening than anger. It left her with a question burning deep inside her chest. Should she step into this unknown future, or run back to the suffering she already knew? Her hands stayed pressed against her lap, nails digging into her skin, as she tried to understand what the human chef had just said. A job? Work here? Shelter? Her mind struggled to accept it. She had lived too long in fear, too long with broken promises, and too many times kindness had turned to chains. She lifted her eyes slowly, searching his face, trying to see if there was a hidden smile, some sign that he was mocking her. But his face was calm, steady, without any trace of cruelty. That made her even more nervous. The room around her seemed to shrink. Every pair of eyes from the customers was on her, heavy with suspicion. Whispers carried through the air like sharp knives. She'll steal from him. It's a mistake. Her kind can't be trusted. Why risk a business for a beggar? Their words cut her, but she had heard worse before. What truly made her chest tight was the silence of the chef, his quiet patience, as if he was giving her all the time she needed. No demand, no order, just waiting. Her lips trembled as she finally asked, "You really mean it? You will let me work here?" The words felt dangerous in her mouth, as if speaking them too loudly would break the fragile dream. The chef nodded once, firm and simple. "Yes?" He turned to pick up another dish, as if the conversation was already finished. Her stomach twisted with fear. She wanted to believe, but disbelief had been her armor for too long. "Why would you trust me?" she whispered. He did not look back at her, but his answer came while he stirred the pan. "Because you asked. Thieves don't ask." The statement struck her harder than any insult ever had. No one had ever called her honest before. No one had ever suggested she was anything more than a nuisance. For a second, she forgot to breathe, but still, her thoughts raced. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe, once she agreed, he would demand something else, something painful, something she could never escape from. Her past had taught her too well that kindness often had claws. She pressed her arms tighter around her body, her heart pounding in her ears. Her eyes darted to the door. It was still open, the night air waiting for her, cold and merciless but familiar. She could leave now before hope could hurt her again. Yet her legs would not move. Her hunger had been filled. Her body felt warm, and for the first time in months, she did not feel invisible. The idea of work, real work, echoed in her mind. to scrub floors, to carry dishes, to sweep. She had done all that before, in places where no one even paid her. To do it here and be given food, maybe even a bed, it was impossible, yet so tempting. The waitress slammed a tray on the counter, her voice sharp. "She will slow us down. We don't need strays." The girl flinched at the word stray. But before the fear could root deeper, the chef's voice cut through the room. "She stays." The firmness of his tone silenced the waitress. Customers muttered, some angry, some simply curious, but no one dared challenge him further. His presence was not loud, yet it carried weight, a quiet authority that no one wanted to test. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she realized the decision was in her hands. She had not been given a choice in years. She swallowed hard, her voice thin. "If I say yes, I must work hard. I cannot fail." The chef finally looked at her again, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "Then work hard. That is all I ask." The simplicity of his demand unsettled her. No hidden trap, no complicated deal, just work. She had always been treated as if her value was nothing, but now he spoke to her as if she had worth, as if her hands could create something instead of just begging. It was almost too much to believe. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned, but she forced the tears back. Showing weakness was dangerous, she reminded herself, but her heart did not listen. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I will try." The words were small, almost fragile, but once spoken, they felt like a chain breaking inside her. For the first time in a long time, she had agreed to something that felt like a future. The chef gave a small nod, already moving back to his stove as though her answer had been expected. "Then it is decided." His calmness made it clear he did not see this as charity. It was simply the beginning of work, a deal, a fair trade. That made her chest loosen just a little. But outside the restaurant, in the shadows of the street, eyes watched closely. A figure leaned against the wall, face hidden beneath a dark hood. He had seen the alien girl walk inside earlier. Now he saw her being welcomed by a human. His lips curled into a cold smile. "So, you think you're safe?" he whispered. His voice carried the weight of old threats, the kind that never stayed buried. He turned and vanished into the crowd, but his presence left a chill behind. Inside, she did not know danger was already close. She only knew her heart was still racing from the strange decision she had made. Every sound of clattering plates and sizzling pans echoed in her ears. She felt the stares of strangers, the doubt in their eyes, but she also felt something else, an invisible thread pulling her forward. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had not been cast aside. Her stomach fluttered with fear and a touch of hope. Maybe this human really was different. Maybe tomorrow, for the first time, she would wake up with a place to belong. She held that fragile thought close, though her mind warned her it could break at any moment. Yet even with that warning, she could not stop the small spark inside her chest from glowing. And deep down, she knew. Her life had just taken a turn she never expected. The morning came with the smell of bread baking in the oven and the crackle of pans heating over the fire. She woke up in a small storage room at the back of the restaurant, lying on a thin mat with a blanket that still felt like luxury compared to the cold stones of the street. For a long moment, she did not move, afraid it was a dream. She touched the blanket, the mat, even the wooden floor, and only when she felt their rough but real textures did she believe she was still here. Her chest felt tight. She whispered to herself, "I am not outside anymore." The sound of footsteps pulled her back to reality. The waitress entered, holding a broom, and frowned when she saw the girl awake. "Get up. Work starts now." The tone was sharp, but not as cruel as the voices she used to hear in the streets. She quickly stood, bowing her head, and followed the waitress into the kitchen. The chef was already busy. His strong hands moved fast, chopping vegetables, throwing spices into boiling pots. Steam filled the room, carrying a mix of scents that made her dizzy with hunger, though she had eaten last night. He noticed her standing there, stiff and unsure, and simply nodded toward a stack of dirty plates. "Wash." His voice was steady, not harsh, but it carried authority that made her move at once. She filled the sink with water and began scrubbing, her thin arms shaking as she worked, but she did not stop. Customers started to arrive. The restaurant filled with chatter, clinking glasses, and the steady rhythm of orders being shouted. She moved silently in the background, carrying trays, wiping tables, sweeping the floor whenever she could. At first, many eyes followed her, judging, waiting for her to make a mistake. She could hear their whispers. She looks weak. Why trust her? She'll break something soon. Their voices stabbed at her heart, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. Every task was a test, and she could not afford to fail. The waitress often barked orders at her, but the girl obeyed quickly, too afraid to give any excuse. When she spilled a few drops of soup on a tray, her hands froze, expecting to be slapped, shouted at, or worse. Instead, the chef simply took the tray, wiped it clean with a cloth, and handed it back. Be careful next time. His calmness startled her more than anger would have. She nodded quickly, her throat tight, and returned to work. Hours passed, and her body screamed with exhaustion, but she refused to slow down. The broom in her hand scraped the floor. Her back ached from bending. Her arms trembled from lifting heavy pots, but she kept going. Somewhere deep inside, fear pushed her, fear that if she stopped, even for a moment, she would be thrown back into the streets. Yet alongside the fear, a strange warmth grew in her chest. No one had cast her out yet. She was still here, still working, still allowed to stay. By afternoon, the restaurant buzzed with more customers. She carried plates to tables, her steps small and careful, and for the first time, a customer looked up at her without disgust. An older alien woman nodded faintly and said, "Thank you." The words froze her in place. No one had ever thanked her before. She stood silent for too long, and the waitress nudged her hard. "Move!" The girl blinked, hurriedly stepped back, but inside, that small thank you burned like a bright flame. When the rush ended, she leaned against the counter, sweat dripping down her face, her breathing heavy. The chef placed a cup of water in front of her. She stared at it, confused, then looked up at him. He did not speak, only gestured for her to drink. She lifted it slowly, her hands shaking, and drank. The water was cool, refreshing, and for a moment she felt like she belonged in this space. But the peace did not last. As the evening grew darker, she noticed something strange. Through the window, across the street, a figure stood still, hidden in the shadow of a wall. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but every time she looked up, the figure was still there, watching, waiting. A cold chill slid down her spine. She knew that posture, that stillness. She had seen it before when she ran from the gang that once claimed her. She dropped her eyes quickly, afraid to draw attention, and forced herself to keep working. Her hands shook more than before, and she spilled a glass of water on a table. The waitress sighed loudly in frustration, but before she could scold, the chef stepped in, cleaning it himself without a word. His calmness again covered her mistake, but this time she felt no comfort. Her thoughts screamed inside her head. They found me. They are here. When night fell and the last customers left, the girl swept the floor while the chef cleaned the stove. The waitress muttered about being tired and left early. The restaurant became quiet, only the crackling of the fire remaining. The girl glanced nervously at the window, but the figure was gone, or maybe hiding. She clutched the broom tightly, her knuckles white. The chef noticed her trembling. "What is it?" he asked. His voice was low but direct. She shook her head quickly. Nothing. She could not tell him. If she spoke, he might send her away. If the gang knew she was here, maybe he would not want the danger near his restaurant. Better to stay silent. Better to hide the truth. But deep down, fear grew heavier in her chest. Her first day of work had given her a taste of belonging, a fragile hope, but now shadows of her past crept closer. She did not know how long she could hide before the danger struck. She leaned on the broom, exhausted, her body aching, her heart restless. For the first time in years, she had a place to stay, but she knew it might not last. And outside, hidden in the darkness, someone else knew exactly where she was. The next days passed quickly inside the restaurant. She worked from morning until late night, scrubbing pots, cleaning tables, and carrying plates heavier than her thin arms could handle. Her back ached, her fingers cracked from soap and hot water, but every evening she still found herself smiling quietly when she sat down with a small bowl of food given to her by the chef. It was not just the taste, it was the feeling that for the first time in years, she earned it. That small piece of pride kept her moving, even when her body screamed to rest. But the unease in her chest never left. Every time she stepped outside to throw out trash or sweep the street, she felt eyes watching her. In the crowd, she sometimes caught a glimpse of a hooded figure, leaning against a wall, pretending to be a stranger. Her heart raced whenever their gaze met, and she quickly looked away, pretending she saw nothing. She tried to convince herself it was imagination, that hunger and fear had made her paranoid. But deep down, she knew. Shadows from her past had found her again. She slept lightly at night. Any sound outside the storage room made her sit up, clutching her thin blanket like a shield. She thought of telling the chef, but fear silenced her. If she told him, he might decide she was too much trouble. He might tell her to leave before danger reached his restaurant. The thought of being thrown back into the streets was worse than silence, so she kept her secret. On the fourth night, when she carried garbage to the alley, a whisper reached her from the dark. "You thought you could escape?" Her blood turned cold. She froze, clutching the bag so tight it almost tore. From the shadows, a tall alien stepped forward, his face twisted with a cruel smile. His eyes glowed faintly, marking him as one of the gang she had once fled from. Behind him, two more figures appeared, blocking the exit of the alley. Her chest tightened as old memories clawed back, chains on her wrists, the stink of the cages, the mocking laughter of her captors. She dropped the bag and stepped back until her back hit the wall. "Stay away," she whispered, though her voice shook. The gang leader laughed. "Stay away? Little rat, you belong to us. You ran, but we always find what is ours." He leaned closer, his sharp teeth flashing. "And now, you think a human can protect you?" Her eyes widened. They had been watching. They knew about the chef. "Don't touch him," she said, surprising herself with the sharpness of her voice. For a moment, the gang leader looked amused. Then he snarled, grabbing her wrist with crushing strength. Pain shot through her arm, and she cried out. "We'll take you tonight, but first, maybe we'll teach your new human friend what happens when people steal from us." Panic exploded inside her chest. She twisted, kicked, scratched, but his grip was iron. The other two moved closer, laughing. She still fights, just like before. Their laughter made her stomach turn. The alley smelled of rot, the air heavy with her fear. She screamed, hoping someone in the street would hear, but the noise of the market drowned her voice. Then footsteps echoed from the corner. The gang froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. The chef stepped into the alley, carrying a heavy crate of supplies. His eyes immediately narrowed when he saw her pinned against the wall. He set the crate down slowly, his jaw tightening. "Let her go." His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced even the laughter of the gang. The leader smirked, not releasing her. "This is not your business, human. She belongs to us." The chef took one step closer. His eyes were sharp, his body calm, but a storm burned beneath the surface. "She works for me. That makes it my business." His hand clenched into a fist, veins tightening on his forearm. The gang laughed again, though uneasily. One sneered, "You're just a cook. What will you do? Throw soup at us?" The chef didn't answer with words. He grabbed a metal lid from the crate, spun it in his hand like a shield, and in the next instant slammed it against the arm holding the girl. The gang leader shouted in pain, releasing her. She stumbled forward, falling into the chef's chest. He pushed her gently behind him, standing between her and the three men. Her heart raced as she clutched his sleeve, terrified he would be hurt. But the chef moved like someone who had seen violence before. His stance was steady, his eyes cold. The gang members hesitated now, their smirks faltering. The leader growled, holding his bruised arm. "You will regret this. No human protects a slave and lives long." The chef's reply was like steel. "She is not your slave. Not anymore." For a moment, the alley was silent, filled only with the sound of dripping water and their heavy breathing. The girl's hands shook as she gripped the fabric of his coat, her chest rising and falling quickly. She expected the gang to attack, to overwhelm him, to drag them both into darkness. But something in the chef's eyes made them pause. He was not just a cook. There was a hardness in him, an edge that spoke of battles fought long before he stood in this restaurant. The leader spat on the ground, glaring. "We'll be back, and when we come, not even your fire will save her." With that, he turned and slipped into the shadows, the others following. Their footsteps faded, leaving only silence behind. The girl collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The chef crouched beside her, his voice calmer now, but still firm. "You knew them." She nodded, unable to speak. Tears streamed down her face, but she wiped them quickly, ashamed. "They will come back," she whispered. Her voice was broken. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. "Then we'll be ready." She looked at him, stunned. He didn't say, "You'll be ready." He said, "We." That single word broke something inside her, and for the first time she sobbed openly, not caring who saw. In that dark alley, surrounded by fear, she felt the first real promise of protection. But she also knew the danger was far from over. The gang had marked her again, and soon they would return. Only this time, she was not alone. Night fell heavy on the city, darker than usual, as if the shadows themselves were waiting. The girl could not sleep. She sat on her mat in the storage room, hugging her knees to her chest, her eyes wide open. Every creak of the wooden walls made her flinch. Every sound from outside made her heart pound faster. She kept replaying the words of the gang leader. "We'll be back." Fear squeezed her throat. She knew they would not stop. In the kitchen, the chef moved quietly, checking the locks on the doors and windows. He had lived long enough to know that threats were not just empty words. He sharpened a heavy kitchen knife, the blade catching the glow of the lantern. The restaurant looked calm, but his eyes stayed alert, waiting for the storm to arrive. It came sooner than expected. The sound of boots echoed in the street, many of them, marching in rhythm. The girl's blood ran cold. She peeked through a crack in the door and saw shadows moving, 5, maybe 6 figures, approaching the restaurant. She whispered to herself, "They found us." Her whole body shook. But before panic could take over, the chef stepped into the room. His voice was steady, quiet, like stone. "Stay behind me." The door crashed open with a loud crack. Splinters flew across the floor. The gang stormed inside, their eyes glowing, weapons in their hands. The leader stepped forward, a cruel grin on his face, his bruised arm still bound with cloth. "We told you, human, no one steals from us." The girl backed away, clutching the corner of the wall. Her breath came fast, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs would not move. The gang spread out, surrounding the chef like hunters circling prey. They laughed at his apron, his cooking knives, his calm stance. "You think you can fight us with spoons?" One of them sneered. But the chef did not flinch. He lifted the long kitchen knife in his hand, the blade shining. "I don't need spoons," he said flatly. Then the first attacker rushed. The fight exploded in the small restaurant. Chairs crashed, tables flipped, dishes shattered across the floor. The chef moved fast, faster than the girl thought possible. He ducked low, swung the knife, and disarmed the first man with a precise strike that sent his weapon clattering. He shoved him into another, using the weight of his body like a weapon. The gang cursed, surprised by his strength. The girl gasped, frozen in the corner, watching chaos unfold. The chef fought like someone who had seen war, not like a simple cook. Every pot, every pan, every tool in the kitchen became his weapon. A boiling kettle was thrown into one man's face, steam burning his skin. A heavy iron pan struck another in the chest, sending him crashing against the wall. The sound of fists, metal, and breaking wood filled the air. But the gang was many, and he was only one. They came at him from every side, their sharp blades flashing in the dim light. He blocked with a tray, sparks flying as metal hit metal. He countered with quick, powerful strikes, but their numbers pressed harder. His shoulder was cut, blood staining his sleeve, yet he did not stop. His eyes burned with determination, with something deeper than anger. He was fighting not just to protect himself, but her. The leader shouted, his voice full of rage, "Hold him! Take the girl!" At once, 2 men broke off from the fight and lunged toward her. She screamed, scrambling back, but there was nowhere to go. Their hands reached for her arms, their cruel laughter filling her ears. Just as their fingers touched her, the chef roared, his voice shaking the air. He hurled a heavy pot across the room. It struck one man's head, dropping him instantly. The other froze for just a second, and in that second the chef was there, slamming him down with brutal force. The girl's heart pounded. She had never seen anyone fight like this, never seen anyone risk so much for her. For the first time, the fear in her chest mixed with awe. She whispered, "Why? Why is he doing this for me?" But there was no time for answers. The battle dragged on, the restaurant turning into a battlefield of broken glass and overturned tables. The chef's breathing grew heavy, his movements slower, but his will remained unbroken. The leader finally stepped in, pulling out a long curved blade. He snarled, "Enough games!" Their weapons clashed, steel against steel, the sound ringing through the night. The leader was faster than the others, stronger, his strikes sharp and cruel. The chef blocked, parried, and countered, sparks lighting the air. The girl crawled under a table, her eyes wide, watching the two men fight. Each strike from the leader pushed the chef back, but each time he stood firm. His arm bled, his face dripped with sweat, yet he refused to fall. At last, the leader raised his blade high for a killing strike. The girl's scream echoed, "No!" The chef moved in that heartbeat, stepping forward instead of back. His knife slashed across the leader's arm, forcing the blade to drop. Then, with a powerful shove, he drove the man into the wall, pinning him there with sheer strength. The restaurant fell silent except for the sound of ragged breathing. The remaining gang members hesitated, fear finally replacing their laughter. The chef's voice was low, deadly calm. "She is not yours. If you come back, you will not leave alive." His eyes locked with the leader's, and for the first time, the cruel alien looked uncertain. He spat blood but said nothing. With a gesture, he ordered his men to retreat. Slowly, limping, bleeding, they slipped into the night, leaving behind broken chairs and shattered pride. The girl crawled out, her body trembling, her throat dry. She looked at the chef, standing tall though his clothes were torn and his arm bled freely. He glanced at her, his expression softer now. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears falling freely. "You fought them, for me." He cleaned his knife on a rag, setting it back on the counter as though it was nothing unusual. "You don't belong to them," he said simply. "As long as you are here, you are safe." Her knees gave way and she sank to the floor, sobbing. No one had ever fought for her, not like this. In the wreckage of the restaurant, among broken plates and overturned tables, she felt something she had never felt before. Not just safety, but belonging. And though fear still whispered that the gang would return, another voice inside her spoke louder now. The voice of hope. The restaurant was quiet after the fight, but the silence carried the weight of broken tables, shattered glass, and blood drops scattered on the floor. The girl sat on the ground, her knees pulled close to her chest, staring at the chaos around her. Her body still shook, the memory of rough hands pulling at her fresh in her mind. Yet, through the storm of fear, one truth shone bright. He had fought for her. The human chef, with nothing but his knives and his strength, had stood against men who terrified even the toughest in the city. She looked at him now. He leaned against the counter, breathing hard, his arm bleeding freely. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but his eyes stayed sharp, steady. He winced when he pressed a cloth to his wound, but he did not complain. When he noticed her staring, he asked softly, "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to say something, but her words refused to come. She rose slowly, her legs weak, and walked to him. For a moment she hesitated, then reached out and touched his sleeve gently, careful not to hurt his arm. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk so much for me?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice firm but not unkind. "Because no one should be treated like they treated you. Not while I'm here." Her chest tightened. She had expected many answers in her life, mockery, demands, threats, but not this. His words carried no hidden trap, no cruel condition. They were simple, but in their simplicity lay something she had almost forgotten existed: respect. The days after the attack were difficult. The restaurant needed repairs. Chairs had to be fixed, tables straightened, windows replaced. Yet customers still came. Some whispered about the fight. Others looked at the chef with new eyes, Bel-Air, no longer seeing just a cook, but someone dangerous to cross. And in the middle of it all, she worked harder than ever. She swept glass, scrubbed bloodstains from the floor, carried new supplies. She refused to rest until every corner was clean. Whenever she stumbled from exhaustion, the chef's voice guided her. "Slow down. Work steady, not fast." He taught her how to move trays with balance, how to cut vegetables safely, even how to stir broth so flavors blended right. At first, her hands trembled with every task, afraid of mistakes. But he never shouted, never raised a hand. If she spilled, he showed her again. If she forgot, he reminded her. Slowly, the fear of failure began to fade, replaced by something stronger: confidence. The customers noticed. At first, they had mocked her, whispering behind their drinks. But as days passed, they saw the change. The alien girl who once looked like a starving shadow now moved with purpose. Her back was straighter, her eyes brighter. Some even began to nod when she placed food before them. One evening, an old alien man said quietly, "Thank you, child." The words froze her for a second, then filled her chest with warmth. But the gang's threat never left her mind. Every night before closing, she checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. She often stood by the window, watching the street for dark figures. The chef knew. He always seemed to know. One night, when he found her staring into the shadows again, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone anymore. Remember that." The words wrapped around her heart, pushing away some of the cold. Then came the day the gang returned. Not with blades, not with shouts, but with silence. Their leader appeared outside the restaurant, his bruised arm bound tighter, his face twisted with hatred. He did not step inside. He only stood there, watching. The girl froze, her blood turning cold, but the chef walked calmly to the doorway and stared back. Neither spoke. The standoff lasted only moments, but it felt like forever. Finally, the leader spat on the ground and left, his eyes burning with promise. She trembled, knowing danger still lingered, but the chef's steady stance reminded her of something new. She was worth protecting. That night, when the restaurant closed, she sat across from him, the dim lantern between them. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, she whispered, "You didn't just give me food." Her voice cracked, tears filling her eyes. "You gave me a life." Her hands shook as she said it, but the truth carried its own strength. The chef leaned back, his face unreadable, but his eyes softened. "Then don't waste it," he said simply. She nodded, wiping her tears quickly, a small smile breaking through. For the first time in years, she believed she had a future. The bond between them grew stronger after that. She was no longer just a beggar in the streets or a frightened runaway. She was his worker, his student, his ally. He had pulled her out of despair and shown her a path. And she, in return, gave him loyalty without question. The city around them might still be dangerous. The gang might still return with sharper blades and more men. But as she wiped down the tables, as she carried trays with steady hands, as she watched the chef prepare meals with quiet skill, she felt a truth settle deep inside her. She was not alone. She had a place. And one day, when she passed a mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Her eyes no longer looked hollow. Her cheeks were fuller, her stance firmer. She touched the reflection with trembling fingers, whispering, "I am not a stray anymore." In the heart of the city, in a small restaurant filled with warmth and the smell of bread, a starving girl had found more than food. She had found dignity. She had found safety. She had found family. And as she closed her eyes that night, lying on her mat with the soft blanket pulled over her, she knew her fate had changed forever. Because a human had offered her not just a meal, but a chance to live.